I thank the chairman. And historically, I do want to point out how this subcommittee really has affected a lot of the positive changes that have occurred at ORR going back to 2014. The oversight of this subcommittee has been important. It's important that it be ongoing. Like Chairman Griffith, I am concerned because the ability to release a child to someone who has not been properly checked is of great concern. I adopted a child at one point, and the scrutiny that I was put under as an adoptive parent, I'll admit at times felt intrusive, but at the same time, you realize you're placing a vulnerable individual with the care of a family. And then Chairwoman Rogers already put it in the record, but this New York Times article from dated yesterday is one of the most searing and unfortunate recitations that I have ever seen. So I guess it just begs the question. Well, you've got in your written testimony, and you mentioned a report entitled "Operational Challenges Within ORR and the ORR Emergency Intake" of Fort Bliss, and I appreciate you including that reference. I pulled that, and it is apparent from that report that there were some changes in the guidance, the field guidance that occurred. Can you tell us a little bit about that, why that was necessary?
Thank you, Representative Burgess, Dr. Burgess, and I do remember coming up to talk to you at one point about unaccompanied children. The changes to the screening, there were reduced safeguards. They removed background checks and identity verification. So let me just back up. This was during the height of the surge in 2021 for the emergency intake facility at Fort Bliss. This guidance did apply more broadly, though. They removed background checks and verification for other adult household members and alternative.
Yeah, and let me just stop you there, because that's my concern. Some of this, I mean, who has the authority? Is it the agency? Are you required to follow law as passed by Congress? Or can the secretary or someone just decide, hey, this is too much trouble and we want to do things differently? I kind of knew this was happening. I like the chairman, I went to Fort Bliss in 2021. I went again in 2022. Although we saw on the television the numbers were vastly increasing, their length of stays were decreasing, and the number of occupants were decreasing. That told me you're sending kids out there and you don't know where they're going or who they're going to. Was I wrong about that?
Are you asking if the sponsor screening was not adequate? I want to make sure I understand the question.
I think I know that it wasn't, but I guess the big question is, who had the authority? Page 15 of your report, where ORR issued field guidance that removes certain steps of the sponsor screening process across ORR facilities, potentially increasing children's risk of release to unsafe sponsors. No kidding. It really did. So who makes that decision?
That would be HHS would have the ability to make the decision to issue guidance. This was field guidance issued by HHS, by ACF, by ORR.
But when you start to connect the dots and you read the New York Times article, it sounds like the domestic policy advisor, Susan Rice, in the White House was kind of putting some pressure to let's get the throughput. And Secretary Becerra himself was quoted in a previous New York Times article as saying, you know, if Henry Ford was running this, we'd get these kids through a lot faster. But that's not the correct way to do things. And we all recognize that. That's why there are rules in place. I guess my question is, who thought that it was okay to change the rules without consulting the legislative branch?
I want to underscore the role of an inspector general. We are independent, we are objective, we strive for transparency and accountability. We do not make the rules, we assess programs according to the rules that exist. In our Fort Bliss report, we do point out that those waived requirements, in combination with a variety of other factors, increase the risk that children could go to an unsafe sponsor. We recognize the need for efficient and expeditious transition to a sponsor, but it needs to be done safely.
Yeah, it does need to be done safely. Ultimately, the decision was made by the executive. People do need to hold the White House accountable on this. This is shameful. It should never have occurred. Mr. Chairman, I've got a bunch of other questions. I'll submit them for the record, but I do want to thank you for holding this hearing today, and I just support your statement that you're going to hold additional hearings here.
I thank the gentleman. He yields back and now recognize